My name is Ed Leckler. I'm a professor of biology. I'm also a scientist as well as a political activist. In this video, I analyzed Donald Trump's claim that the 2020 election was stolen. In fact, about 30% of people polled recently believe Trump's claim is true, including over half of Republicans. Most of the rest believe Trump's claim is not true, or they're not sure. How come there isn't a consensus? Partially, it's because people hear conclusions on each side, but without the facts and the reasoning that would allow an independent assessment. So it's he says, she says. Now, both sides can't be right. In this video, I succinctly work through the four most prominent allegations of fraud, namely 66,000 illegal votes being cast in Georgia, 600 to 700,000 illegal votes in Pennsylvania, 100,000 illegal votes in Michigan, and voting machine fraud. At the end, the conclusion will become obvious. Pertinent references are included along the way. In the book Landslide, which chronicles the final months of the Trump administration, author Michael Wolff recounts his interview with Trump at Mar-a-Lago in March of this year. Trump stated, "They dumped hundreds of thousands of ballots." When asked to clarify, he said they meant a group of people within the Democrat Party working along with big tech and the media. When asked for specifics, he said, "Names are going to be revealed." Trump is referring to allegations that he and his lawyers, notably Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell, made in numerous court cases in late 2020. First, it's important to be clear that these allegations are not facts. Allegations must be established as facts based on evidence. Though Trump presents these allegations as if they were facts, they're actually nothing more than claims made by individuals who assert in a written affidavit that they know something or they've seen something. There's no reason to assume with certainty that those claims are in fact true. Giuliani sought to establish the factual basis of their allegations in over 50 court cases, which were ultimately heard by at least 86 judges. Notably, 38 of those judges were appointed by Republican presidents. In all 50 plus court cases, the judges ruled against Giuliani's and Trump's claims of fraud because of a lack of evidence. Later, I'll provide excerpts from these rulings, which demonstrate that the judges viewed Giuliani's allegations as wild speculation with no evidence to back them up. But I start by analyzing those four most prominent allegations and why the judges' rulings made sense. The 2020 presidential election came down to 5 states: Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Georgia, all of which Biden won. So I focus on allegations from those steps. At least 3 of those states would have had to go for Trump for him to have won the 2020 election. Let's begin with Trump's and Giuliani's allegation that 66,000 underage voters voted in Georgia. In fact, Georgia did 3 recount audits of its ballots and found no evidence for this or any other allegations of fraud. Georgia's Republican Secretary of State, Fred Raffensperger, reported that only 4 underage voters requested mail-in ballots, though each of those voters turned 18 before Election Day. But that fact about the recount doesn't speak to the possibility that some kind of illegal voting scheme was perpetrated. However, if we work through what would have had to happen, I think you'll come to agree that this allegation cannot possibly be true. First, it's impossible to imagine that spontaneously 66,000 underage Georgia voters independently just happened to decide to vote illegally. So this alleged fraud must have been orchestrated, presumably by someone in the Democratic Party. Whoever did it must have identified and reached out to at least 66,000 Democrats with children close to voting age to encourage them to get their underage children to vote illegally. Let's start by asking the question, if you were the parent of such a youth, would you jeopardize your child's future by asking them to vote illegally and thereby potentially ruin the rest of their lives? Remember, illegal voting has serious consequences, including potentially jail time. Let's analyze more deeply. Even if 66,000 youth were willing to go along with this illegality, someone can't just get a mail-in ballot from somewhere, fill it out, mail it in, and have it be counted. A person must be a registered voter and on the voter roll. In Georgia, voter registration requires a Georgia driver's license, or in rare cases, Georgia-issued ID. So that presents another problem. A legal Georgia driver's license will show that an underage voter is in fact underage. That means that somehow those 66,000 underage voters would have had to get an illegal Georgia driver's license with a fraudulent date of birth. Furthermore, for this ruse to be ironclad, somehow their date of birth would have been changed, would have had to have been changed in official records in Georgia. So how could these 66,000 illegal driver's licenses have been generated and distributed to those voters? And how would the dates of birth have been altered in Georgia records? I hope you're beginning to appreciate just how absurd this allegation actually is when you walk through all the steps that would have been required to allow those 66,000 underage voters to vote in the 2020 Georgia election. Let's turn to a second allegation that 600 to 700,000 illegal mail-in ballots were counted in Pennsylvania. In Pennsylvania, approximately 7.8 million voters voted. So 700,000 illegal ballots would actually represent almost 10% of the total. Furthermore, 700,000 illegal mail-in ballots would represent almost 30% of all mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania. The votes in Pennsylvania were also audited. No evidence for this allegation was uncovered. If such a high fraction of Pennsylvania ballots were fraudulent, doesn't it stand to reason that it would have been detected in that audit? But let's go deeper. 700,000 ballots are a lot of ballots. Let's imagine it takes 5 minutes to fill out a mail-in ballot. It took me longer, but let's imagine that whoever filled out these alleged illegal ballots got to be good at doing it. When you do the math, that would require about 1,000 people to be filling out mail-in ballots for a full 40-hour work week. Doesn't that strike you that such an enterprise could not possibly have been kept a secret? But let's go deeper still. Whose names were those 1,000 people writing on those fraudulent mail-in ballots? Unless they wrote the name of a registered voter, those ballots would have been rejected. How do you suppose those people filling out ballots figured out which 700,000 voter names to use? It had to be voters who were not destined to vote. Otherwise, the ballots would have been rejected. And remember, mail-in ballots must be signed. How would those 1,000 people know how to imitate the signature of the person they were making out a ballot for? But it gets even worse. Mail-in ballots were counted at one site in each of Pennsylvania's 67 counties. Those 700,000 illegal ballots couldn't simply have been dumped at a single site. A site expecting 35,000 mail-in ballots would notice an extra 700 ballots showing up, which means that those 700,000 ballots had to be distributed proportionally to every single county voting site. How could that have been arranged without it being detected anywhere? Especially given that 54 counties voted for Trump. I hope you can appreciate just how absurd at its core this second allegation is. Let's go on to a third allegation. As many as 100,000 illegal ballots were dumped for counting at the TCF Center 8 hours after the polls had closed in Detroit, Michigan on November 3rd. In fact, this is totally normal for Detroit. Trump trucks collect ballots after 8 p.m. on election night from many remote locations, such as drop boxes, satellite offices. The ballots are then brought to the county clerk's office to be compiled, processed, and validated. Only then are they transported to the TCF Center for counting, often then very late at night. The allegation of voter fraud, along with dozens of others, were investigated by the Michigan Senate Oversight Committee, a committee that includes 3 Republican Michigan state senators and but a single Democratic state senator. Ultimately, this committee released a 35-page report about allegations of voter fraud in Michigan. The report explains that what happened in Detroit is completely normal. The report concludes that our clear finding is that citizens should be confident that the results represent the true results of the ballots cast by the people of Michigan. The report also states the committee strongly recommends citizens use a critical eye and ear towards those who have pushed demonstrably false theories about the Michigan election. Chairman Ed McBroom, a Republican senator from Vulcan, Michigan, remarked that the claims have become ludicrous when compared to the actual facts. A fourth allegation is that votes were stolen from Trump via voting machine manipulation. Dominion voting machines were cited most often, and the most detailed example offered came from Antrim County, Michigan. It was thoroughly investigated by the Michigan Senate Oversight Committee. Now, Michigan has paper ballots for every single vote, and every vote in Antrim County was subjected to an audit. The conclusion was a complete hand recount validated the original official results as accurate. There was a problem in Antrim County, but it was due to election officials using the wrong vote compiling program and not to a voting machine problem, as the report describes in considerable detail. This issue was detected the day after the election and corrected. But the Michigan Senate Oversight Committee report also states about Antrim County, the committee is appalled at what can only be deduced as a willful ignorance or avoidance of this proof of the accuracy of the vote, which has been perpetrated by some leading such speculation. Let me add that the 5 key states that swung the election to Biden have paper ballots for all votes cast. And 4 of those states conducted audits after the November election. In each case, the audited vote tally agreed with the original final vote tally within statistical limits. This finding rules out all allegations of voting machine-based fraud, internet vote fraud, and a variety of other allegations of fraud. Wisconsin is the state that did not do an audit. Let's go back and consider some of the judge's findings from those 50+ cases that Rudy Giuliani brought on behalf of Donald Trump. Regarding allegations of voter fraud in Wisconsin, U.S. District Court Judge Brett Ludwig, a Trump appointee, stated, "A sitting president has asked for federal court help in setting aside the popular vote based on disputed issues of election administration. This court has allowed plaintiff, meaning Trump, to make his case, and he has lost on the merits. In Pennsylvania, U.S. Circuit Court Judge Stefanos Bibas, also a Trump appointee, wrote on behalf of a 3-judge panel, all appointed by Republicans, calling an election unfair does not make it so. Charges require specific allegations and then proof. We have neither here. U.S. District Court Judge Matthew Braun, who previously had served as the chairman of Pennsylvania's Bradford County Republican Committee, called the Trump campaign's stitched together legal theories a Frankenstein's monster. He stated, "This court has been presented with strained legal arguments without merit and speculative assertions, unpled in the operative complaint and unsupported by evidence." He concluded, "In the United States of America, this cannot justify the disenfranchisement of a single voter, let alone all the voters of its 6th most populated state, meaning Pennsylvania. Our people, laws, and institutions demand more." Let me begin by summarizing. In March 2021, Rudy Giuliani's license was suspended by the Attorney Grievance Committee of the First Judicial Department in New York State. It was suspended because Giuliani made demonstrably false and misleading statements about the 2020 election. This being further evidence that what Giuliani argued on Trump's behalf was not sensible. And no less than William Barr, Trump's Attorney General, and a lifelong Republican, had the Justice Department, which includes the FBI, investigate Trump's claims of election fraud. Barr concluded that we have not seen fraud on a scale that would have affected a different outcome in the election. Ultimately, Trump's continuing claims of voter fraud became a bridge that not even William Barr was willing to cross. He ultimately felt compelled to resign. Later, Barr said, "My suspicion all along was that there was nothing there. The claim of election fraud was all bullpucky." As a scientist, I was trained to follow facts and reasoning to reach conclusions. I conclude that Trump's claims that the 2020 election was stolen are not supported by facts or logic. I want to add that I was prompted to make this video for those who are not sure whether the 2020 election was stolen or not. I hope that anyone watching this analysis now understands the truth.